Seth David here from the world famous Nerd Enterprises Incorporated, bringing to you another special screencast. This time we're talking about how to use QuickBooks Online in 2021. So we're going to give you a good and thorough overview of everything you need to know to get started using QuickBooks Online in 2021. I've got a lot to cover and not a lot of time to cover it in, so let's get right into it. Let's take a look at my screen and I'll show you what I've got for you. So first, we're going to cover a lot of areas that I want to cover here in this article. We're going to talk about pricing and options. We're going to talk about what's in the gear icon. We're going to talk about settings. We're going to talk about your chart of accounts. We're going to talk about bank recs. We're going to talk about the quick create function. We're going to talk about basic transactions such as invoice, expenses, bills. Then we're going to talk about banking and bank feeds. And then we'll look at reports, the navigation bar, and we'll look at the recent transactions feature in QuickBooks Online. So, like I said, a lot to cover in a short video. So, let's dive right in. The first thing, pricing and options. This is linked in the write-up, by the way. If you don't have an account on my site, it's really easy to get an account on my site. Just go over to any page on the site. That is the back end. Let's go to the front end. And if you're not logged in, you'll see an option here to log in. And of course, you'll also have an option to create an account if you don't already have one. You can also opt in here. This will opt you in for my weekly email updates, so you'll be notified about tutorials just like this one. And in the process, it will create your account for you. This will give you access to all the free content that I do here on my website. It's just organized in a course that I set up as a free course. This way I can give you a nice, easy to follow layout on all the resources that I offer you. So make sure you have access to the content that's on my site. If you're watching this on YouTube, you're going to miss the write-up, and you don't want to miss the write-up on something like this. Just to give you kind of a quick sneak preview on that, it's detailed. It's got screenshots. It's got all kinds of links to other resources, including, in some cases, other articles that I've done. So you definitely want to be able to get access to this write-up if you're watching this video on YouTube or elsewhere and don't have access to the write-up. All right, that takes care of the housekeeping. Let's now dive into the pricing and what your options are there. So again, in the write-up, you'll have the link. If it's not hard to find, if you Google QuickBooks Online pricing, you'll find this page with this layout. Some things have changed. There used to be a version called Essentials. That's gone. They've rearranged things. They've renamed it a bit. So here are your choices as of this recording. We have Simple Start, Plus, Advanced, and Self-Employed, which is the Freelancer version. As you can see, this is very inexpensive. There's a reason why. It's because it's really designed for the Uber drivers or other kinds of freelancers who have very, very simple needs accounting-wise. So if you have any kind of a business beyond what is truly a freelancer, very simple business where, as an example, if all you need to do is track receipts so you can get a return filed at the end of the year, basic expenses and receipts and mileage and things, then that's where the freelancer version is for. Anybody else, if you need a balance sheet and a P&L and you need other detailed reporting, you're out of there. You're not in the Freelancer version anymore. And important note, you cannot upgrade from Freelancer, from Self-Employed, to any of these other versions, right? So that's important to note also. If you take the Self-Employed version and decide you need something more robust, you're going to be setting up a brand new company in QuickBooks Online Plus or something like that. With that in mind, I almost never suggest Simple Start for anyone. It's just not enough for most people's cases, at least based on the companies that I work with. And so most people I start off in Plus, unless your company is big enough that it warrants going to the expense of Advanced. Advanced has some really slick features in it, but it's also a lot more money. Now, while we're here, you can go here, you can sign up. They give you 50% off for 3 months. I can get you 50% off for a year. So again, in the write-up, there's a link that will take you to a form that you can fill out, which you give me your information about exactly what you want, which QBO product you want to choose, and I will have your company set up within 1 business day, and you'll have 50% off for the first year, okay? So that's the story on pricing and what your options are there. Okay, Next, let's look at the gear icon. Okay, it's up at the top right. As you would expect with, as is the case with most software, that's where you're going to find a lot of your settings, right? You'll also notice throughout there's little gear icons in other places. So pay attention. There's lots of little details here that the more you get yourself in the habit of slowing down and taking a look at what some of these options are and where they are, the better you'll get. At using QuickBooks Online, the more comfortable you'll get, and the better you'll understand just how things are laid out and how things work. So, as you can see, the gear icon menu is broken down into, essentially 3 major areas. 4 if you count the profile part. We have your company. And that's where you're going to, establish all your settings. Lists, right? The most common lists that you're likely to want to access are shown right here, but of course you can click All Lists. Important note, the sample company that I'm using is in the QuickBooks Online Advanced product. So if you're not using QuickBooks Online Advanced, you won't have custom fields, okay? I think everything else here you'll have. Tags are universal in all the products, except, of course, for the Freelancer. And you have tools, which a lot of this you're going to look at, and if you're not an accountant, you're going to think, oh, that's for my accountant, but it's not a bad idea for business owners to also get familiar with what's here. For example, a lot of people want to know, all right, I migrated from QuickBooks Desktop to QuickBooks Online. Can I go back to QuickBooks Desktop? Well, a good way to find the answer on your own is to come over here and click where it says Export Data and see what your options are. And as I mentioned in the write-up, if you do that, you'll find that there are references that will lead you to believe that you can export your data to QuickBooks Desktop. The truth is, it's not a direct export where you're going to get a file that you can just open up in QuickBooks Desktop. You'll find instructions for how to export various different lists and reports and things into Excel files, and then those Excel files can be imported to QuickBooks Desktop. So the answer is yes, it can be done, but not easily, okay? So you always get the honest answer from me on things like that. One of the first things I do when I go into any company is I go thoroughly through the account and settings area. This is because there's a lot of stuff in here, and let me click on that again because it doesn't seem to have taken. There's a lot of stuff in here that you'll want to go through and just, first of all, you'll want to explore and find out what's here, find out what your options are, find out what different things you can do and use. And for me, there's a lot of settings that I already know about. And sometimes, frankly, I even forget where they are in the navigation because there's just a lot, right? So by going, anytime I set up a new company, I go through this, each section by section, and I tweak the settings. You'll see usage here. Again, this is QuickBooks Online Advanced, so it's all pretty much unlimited, right? Then we go into the sales area, and you have sales settings. Here's where you can go and customize the look and feel of your sales forms, like your invoices and things, right? So if you're new to QuickBooks Online, you might want to grab your favorite note-taking app and just make notes about, as you're going through this, things that strike you as something that you'll want to know where to go to find later, as something you're going to want to get into at some point. If not right now, make notes about where things are. And as I'll mention later, any of these screens that you're in, you can grab the URL directly to that screen and you can bookmark it somewhere in your browser, Bookmarks, or in a document, right? So you're going to go through each of these sections one by one, and you're going to go through everything just to make sure that you've run across everything that you might want to change or update or just understand, and just know where everything is. One example of something that's not easy to find or necessarily remember where it is, if I go straight to the advanced section, all the way at the bottom, this is a key preference. I didn't know it existed until I was in a very big journal entry I was working on for over an hour, and I got kicked out of the company, and I lost hours worth of work. I was livid. And then as a result of my frustration there and my researching, like there has to be something that can be done about this, I found that this setting, which the default is 1 hour, can be changed to 3. And of course, from that, I also learned to just save the transaction periodically, especially when you're working on something big like that. And then I can just go back and continue editing the transaction. Okay, so there's lots to go through here. I'm not going to go through it all now. I just want to encourage you to take the time to go through every one of these sections, every piece of information there is to look at here. Throughout this process, you'll find out where you can go to turn on things like class tracking and location tracking, and where you can choose whether or not you want to be able to track expenses and items by customer and those sorts of things. There's lots of these little settings that are in here, so it's important, and it's important to do first thing to go through, because then you start, downloading transactions and things, and all of a sudden something you need isn't turned on, so that's why this is important to do, and to do it first, okay? Now let's go back and take a look at our lists. In the gear icon, as I mentioned, you can access all of your lists by simply clicking here where it says all lists, but the ones that you see below that up here are the ones that you're most likely to want to access most frequently, right? Like your products and services, recurring transactions. You can get access to all the attachments. So as you attach documents to transactions, you can go here and you can just see a list of all the attachments just globally that are in your books. Custom fields, as I mentioned, is only in QuickBooks Online Advanced. Tags are in all the products, and tags are a fairly new feature, and I've recently done a video on that, so look out for that one. It's in the same area where you're probably finding this one if you've accessed it on my site. So that's your lists. Okay, then tools, like I said, a lot of accounting-y stuff, but you should definitely get familiar with this if you're a business owner. Within that, the audit log. Really cool. If you ever get into it with anybody, a staff member or whoever, or your bookkeeper, or if you're the accountant and you get into it with your client, this is the perfect way to go in and figure out who posted what and when, and who made whatever changes were ever made. Every transaction maintains an audit log. Every change to every transaction is tracked, when it happened, who did it, and so on. So this audit log can be a big time saver, because a lot of times it's really just about quickly getting to the root of, who created the transaction, who made the mistake, whatever it was. Not so you can slam the person for it, but rather so you can get past that part of the conversation and then get into, how to fix it and how to do it right next time. So I love the audit log. Then we have Reclassify Transactions. This used to be an accountant-only feature, but I checked by switching to the business view. It's still there, it looks like, unless for accountants they show it in both views, but I assume the point of business view is to see what it looks like when you're not an accountant. Anyway, this should be here. If it isn't, reach out to me or post a comment. I can give you a URL that will allow you to access this, whether or not you're in the accountant version for sure. Either way, this lets you go in. And a classic use case is, I'm the accountant, I send you a list of uncategorized transactions in Smartsheet or some other place. You go through and make your comments to let me know what each thing was for. And now what I want to do is go into Reclassify Transactions, and this is a sample company that doesn't have a lot of data in it. But over here, I can find the uncategorized expenses, and I can sort it by by name or payee, for example. So I can quickly go in here and check off all the transactions to the same payee, because in many cases they're all going to go and get reclassified to the same account. And in a few clicks, I can quickly clean that up based on the feedback that my client has given me about what really belongs where. Okay, so that's it for the gear icon and what's in the tools. Now I'd like to talk about the chart of accounts. The chart of accounts is essentially, it's like the backbone of your accounting system. It's where all of your transactions live. Now, many people ask me about like a template for the chart of accounts for their industry type and whatnot. I'm sort of against it, because I really believe that the best way to develop your chart of accounts is to create what you need as you need it, as the need arises. This way you don't wind up with accounts that you don't need. And it's very easy to create accounts in your chart of accounts. If you go directly to the chart of accounts, as I've done, and you click New, you can pretty much walk through the menus. In the right above explained, there's 5 different account types, but each of those 5 account types have sort of subtypes within them, right? So you have assets, but a bank account is a kind of asset. Accounts receivable is a kind of asset, so on and so forth. You can get the more detailed review of that information in the write-up. But essentially you walk through and choose what type of account you're setting up. The detail type is not terribly important, but I would take the time to do it just because it's there, and I like to do things bulletproof, so why not? It's better to take the time to do it and never need it than to not take the time to do it only to find out that some change or something that's done later. One thing I always think of is if they ever tweak the reporting area so that I have access to filter it by the detail type in reports, it could make for some interesting reporting. Hint, hint to my friends at Intuit. A lot of us accountants would love to be able to access the detail type in reports. In any case, so take the time to choose whatever fits best. And if you're the business owner and you're not sure, that's why you have us accountants here. You can reach out to us and ask us, and we'll help you. And of course, you'll name it, and then you can create sub-accounts, which are just accounts that live underneath parent accounts. Be careful with this one because it can get messy if you're not careful about it. Okay, so that's your chart of accounts. Get familiar with the different account types. If you're a business owner who doesn't have an accounting background, you don't need an accounting degree, but you should have some familiarity and understand the basic differences between assets, liabilities, equity, revenue, and expenses. And then last note on this, because I have it in the write-up, is if any of you have any experience in the world of finance, then you've probably heard or seen the term EBITDA, EBITDA. It stands for earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. Okay, in terms of what you see in QuickBooks, that EBITDA number really should be your operating income. So when you run a profit and loss report, near the very bottom, you'll see net operating income. Okay, and what that means is all of these other accounts, interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, should go below that, which means when you're creating a new account here, you'll want to choose either other income or other expense. And then you'll see, notice as the detail type, once you've chosen other expense, you'll have these choices: amortization, depreciation, and so on. You won't find interest expense here. The interest expense will be available as a detail type for regular expenses. I think that's probably just because that's what most people do, even though it's technically incorrect. I shouldn't say incorrect. It's just not the perfect way. It's not the bulletproof way. Let's put it that way. So in that case, I wouldn't worry too much about the detail type. Classify it as other expense and just pick, you can even pick like other miscellaneous expenses or something like that. Again, this isn't real critical. I wouldn't get too hung up on it. Just do your best to find whatever fits the best, right? Next, let's talk about bank reconciliation. Bank reconciliations are the most fundamental, important part of your bookkeeping system. If you want bulletproof books, make sure you reconcile every single bank account and every single credit card account and never, ever plug a number. It's simple math. Beginning balance plus additions minus subtractions equals ending balance. It's tempting to plug a difference if it looks small, but bear in mind that what looks like a very small difference can in fact be the aggregate of two or more large differences that are just going in opposing directions. And don't think that just because it nets out as a small number, it's immaterial. It very likely is not immaterial. And like I said, the bottom line is it should be very easy to find and fix any differences you have when you're reconciling, especially these days. You go onto your bank account, you grab a CSV file, which stands for comma separated value. Every bank has this format. You can get your monthly statement as a CSV, open it in Excel, sort it by amount. You can break up your statement that way between additions and subtractions, and that should help you very easily find any differences you're running into when you're reconciling your bank and credit card statements each month. Bottom line is, if you know you've accounted for everything and never plugged the number, then you know there can't possibly be anything missing on your books, and it also helps you identify if there's anything in your books that shouldn't be there, something that never cleared, that clearly at a certain point is never going to clear, a check you wrote somebody and they've lost it, so on and so forth, right? Next, I want to talk about what's called the Quick Create. This button here that says plus new is where you will go, and as you can guess by the name Quick Create, it's where you can go to quickly create any kind of transaction. As you can see, it's nicely organized in terms of the areas. So if it's a transaction that has to do with a customer, like an invoice or receiving a payment on the invoice, or I want to create an estimate, credit memo, and so on, all of that is right here under customers. Same with vendors. Any expense I want to create, a check I want to write, and so on, all right here under vendors. Employees, if you have employees in payroll, you'll find those options here. And other would be things that don't necessarily have to do specifically with any of these areas, like a deposit. A deposit could be money that you got from a customer. It could also be something to do with a vendor, such as a refund. It could be a lot of things, so it's grouped under other, okay? That's your Quick Create. And from there, what I want to do is talk about some of the basic transactions that you'll want to be able to start entering if you're starting out with QuickBooks Online in 2021. So let's start with the most fun and exciting part. Under customers, we have invoices and we have sales receipts. I'm going to go straight to the sales receipt, and I'll explain the difference essentially between the two, okay? In both cases, you'll have a customer to enter, right? Because you can't collect income without knowing who you're getting it from. Most of this is very straightforward in terms of how you'll fill it out. The sales receipt, you'll have the sales receipt date. On an invoice, you'll also have a due date, right? So on an invoice, it's an invoice date, and a due date. Ignore this referral source. That's a custom field which is specific to the advanced product. Tags, again, I have another video I've done recently on tags, so I will link you to that so that you can learn all about how tags work. It's just a really slick reporting mechanism that they've added in. You can choose what payment method, how you got paid, a reference number if you want. And now with a sales receipt, and this is the core difference between a sales receipt and an invoice. A sales receipt assumes I'm getting paid right now. Think of yourself in a retail store. Somebody's walked in and they're buying the merchandise. I'm going to give them a receipt, right? That's what this is. It means I got paid right now, which means as I get the money, I can tell QuickBooks where it's being deposited. Now, bear in mind that this might be one of many sales receipts throughout the day. And if you're getting checks, for example, from customers, then you might have 6 or 7 checks that you got throughout the day that are all going to be deposited together tomorrow. And if that's the case, then you'll want to put these into undeposited funds. Okay? Other than that, if you're getting a single check and you know that that check is the only thing that's going to be deposited, so that the deposit into your bank account is going to be that exact amount, then you can put this sales receipt as a deposit directly to your bank account. When in doubt, stick it in undeposited funds, then you go to make a deposit and you can grab anything that belongs together that got included in the actual deposit that went to the bank. From here on down, the forms are identical, right? I've customized in this company file to include a service date. Again, that goes back to why it's important to go through all those settings, because among other things, that's where you'll find this setting, that you want to include a service date on your invoices. Here you'll have your products and services, which are going to need to get set up. You'll see some stuff in here from a recent video I did on how to set up QuickBooks Online for a pet sitting business. So you'll see products and services I created for that, right? So you'll choose, these are the things you sell. In order to do this, you'll need to have your income accounts in place, because any product or service that you sell has to be linked to an income account. That's why I talked about the chart of accounts first. And again, in the write-up, you'll see a lot more detail on that in terms of what you need to know. Of course, you can put in a description. If need be, you can describe a quantity and what the rate is for each, and the amount gets calculated from there. You can also ignore these and go straight into the amount column and just say, I'm selling a 30-minute walk, and it's going to be, $250 or whatever it is, right? And so then it just backs into these, based on a quantity of 1 at a rate of $250. Invoice, like I said, works exactly the same way. And again, the only real difference there is with an invoice, the assumption is you're going to get paid later. So if you create an invoice, then you're going to have to go in and create a transaction where you receive a payment. When you do this and you enter the customer, it'll bring up a list of all the open invoices for that customer, and you'll choose which one, if not all of them, that you're getting paid for. And now there's a deposit to, just like on the sales receipt, where you'll decide, where's this money going to go? Is it going to go directly into the bank, or do I need to couple it with other payments I'm receiving so that they all get deposited together? That way my deposit total in QuickBooks exactly matches my deposit total in the bank. Okay, so that is your invoice and sales receipt. Next, we'll look at expenses and checks. So expenses or checks, what's the difference? Well, a check assumes you're going to have a check number, and a check is a kind of expense that can only come out of a bank account, right? So if I click here, I look at my source account, I can only choose from among my bank accounts, okay? By contrast, an expense transaction, I can use my bank accounts as the payment source, but I can also access my credit card account. So if I'm recording a credit card charge, then expense is definitely what I'll need to use. You're seeing now that you can also choose any of your other current asset accounts as the payment source. It comes in handy, but it's a more advanced thing. I wouldn't worry about it too much for right now. But that's essentially what an expense is. And similar to the invoice, it's a pretty straightforward form. The payee, who did you pay, right? Again, the source account. Once you've chosen the account you're paying from, it shows you what that account's balance is, so you can make sure there's enough money to cover it. Okay, the payment date, of course, when did I make the charge on the credit card, or when did I write the check? The payment method you can do. This isn't critically important. Reference number if applicable. Ignore this. This is based on what's called location tracking. So for like a real estate concern, you can list your properties this way. Okay, and permit number is I believe a custom field that I was playing around with. Okay, other than that, just like the invoice, you're going to have a category. So what was this for? If I paid Staples for office supplies, and this is going to be office supplies. And the simple way to figure out what goes here is to think about, what did I just pay for, right? The answer to that question should help understand what account goes here. And as I alluded to earlier, you can always put something in uncategorized expenses if you're a business owner who needs to clarify with your accountant, somebody like me, where that should go, right? And even sometimes as the accountant, I'll put things in uncategorized expenses because I have to ask you as the business owner what it was for. I may not know. It's not always clear from the payee what the nature of the expense is, right? The rest, again, is pretty straightforward. You'll put in your description, amount. If it's billable back to a customer, then you'll have to enter a customer here. And we have class tracking, which, again, is why it's important to go through all the settings so that if you want it, you can turn on class tracking. Otherwise, this column would not appear here in this transaction. Okay, so that's your checks and expenses. Next, we're going to look at entering bills, right? So entering a bill is really not much different than entering an expense, except for the fact that notice there's no payment source account because we're not paying it. All bills, the source account in effect, is accounts payable. That's where they all go. Other than that, it's exactly the same, except you'll have a bill date and then a due date for when it's due, a bill number for whatever the invoice or reference number is, and then again, you'll have the category. If you got a bill from Staples, maybe it's office supplies or whatever, right? So other than that, you'll notice this part, the screen is no different. It's exactly the same. It's the same information we need. The only difference is it's not being paid for now. So when I save this, it's going to go into accounts payable. And then later I can run a report called unpaid bills that will show me the list of all the bills I've entered that I haven't paid yet. And I can use that to figure out which bills I want to pay. And then it's just going into the quick create and going here to pay bills. This will get you a list of all the unpaid bills, and you can check them off and indicate if you're printing checks, there's an option for that, or if you're paying by credit card, you can choose which credit card, and it will create a charge on that credit card to pay off the bill that's in accounts payable. Okay, next, banking and bank fees. If you go here to banking and just click on the item here, it takes you into the banking area. This is where you can download code and then eventually reconcile your transactions. Notice across the top here, you also have your rules, so you can create rules to make this part go faster. You can access receipts here that you've attached, and then you can access your tags here in the banking area, right? So I'm not going to go too deep into this because that would be a whole other 20-minute video, and we're already over that here. But I did give you in the write-up two links actually, to other articles and videos I've recently done. One called QuickBooks Online Setup Chart of Accounts and Banking Credit Card Accounts Deep Dive. And the other one is called QuickBooks Online Banking Credit Card Account Register Deep Dive. So the first one gives you a deep dive on how to manage this whole area. Okay. The second one, if you go to a bank register, this is what the bank account looks like sort of behind the scenes, right? You can also access this by going to your chart of accounts and then clicking into View Register here. Both take you to the same place. So the second video is a deep dive on how to sort of navigate this register and some of the cool things you can do here in the filter, especially when you're looking for transactions and you don't know exactly where you're going to find it and you want to kind of limit the view based on certain criteria. Lots of really powerful things you can do here. Almost done. Stay with me. Okay, next I want to look at reports. If you click into the reports area, you'll see that it's broken down in groupings. You can favorite things by clicking a star next to it, and it'll show up here. Okay, and they've also simplified the language so that the non-accountant business owner can more easily find what they may be looking for. So you have the business overview stuff. You have who owes you. In accounting terms, that would be accounts receivable, right? You have sales and customers. That's pretty straightforward. What you owe. In accounting terms, that would be accounts payable, right? You have expenses and vendors and sales tax and employees, and then for the accountant, right? And then we have payroll-related reports here. As you get more familiar with the way the reports are named and the reports that you like to run, you can find reports by name. You can also customize reports and save them here in the custom reports area. So, a lot of times you're going to start with one of these standard reports, but then there's going to be ways that you want to chisel it down to something specific. And you can do that, and then you can save it so you don't have to keep redoing, or re-updating those settings, so to speak, every time you want to run that report. Now, a word about reports. I was laughing a few years ago when I produced a video comparing QuickBooks Online to another popular cloud accounting product. And the fans of the other product who watched that video said I was, putting too much emphasis on reports. Surprisingly, a lot of these were people who run accounting firms. So let me just say it really loud right here for the CPAs in the back row. Reports are the most important thing in your accounting system. Okay, I feel better now. Now, the whole point of spending all kinds of time and money getting data into your accounting system is to get reliable intelligence out of your accounting system, and that means reports. So, in the write-up, I've linked another article for you called 8 Reports Every Company should set up in QuickBooks Online. So, again, get the write-up. You'll have all the links to all these resources. I will also link things up in the descriptions on YouTube and Vimeo for those of you who are absolutely against going to my website. Now, again, we're almost done. The navigation bar, the nav bar. You've been seeing me access this already on the left here. This changes, Intuit changes it from time to time, so bear with me. It might be that if you're watching this a year or so after I originally recorded this, things may very well have changed, from, this to what it will look like for you at this point. But they don't change it too much. It's little things here and there. You'll also see that happens, that sometimes these things that pop out just kind of have a way of hanging around. So if they do that, just hover your mouse back over this section and then away, and it usually goes away. Okay, but obviously this is just where you can navigate the major areas of your accounting system. And I want to point out, and I've kind of pointed to this already, if I, for example, just click on sales without going to any of the pop-outs, if I just click sales, it takes me into the sales overview area. And I want to direct your attention to the top here. Notice across the top, you have all the same choices you had when you hovered your mouse and the pop-up came. Okay, and this is very handy. At first I was forgetting about this, and I kept going back here and back to, say, the products and services. But it's really handy that from here I can get right to the products and services. I can play around with that. And then I can jump back to look at all the invoices and open invoices and things. And then, of course, here I can access my complete customer list. So that's your nav bar. Go through this. As I've said a few times about some of the other areas, like the settings, go through this. Get familiar with what's here. You're going to find that there are things you like to access frequently that you may not want to, just have to navigate to step by step each time. This is cloud accounting software. You can grab the URL of any screen, including a specific transaction if you needed to, and you can bookmark that. A lot of accountants will create a bookmark in their browser called, something like QuickBooks Online Bookmarks, and that way, once you're logged into any company file, you can click on those bookmarks and it'll take you straight there. In the write-up, I gave you an example where I gave you the bookmark that takes you directly to your products and services list. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to click over to the overview, and on my other screen, I'm going to click that link that's in the write-up. And of course, it opened it up on the other tab. So let me get this down here quick so you can see it loading. And boom, it takes me straight into the area where I have my products and services. So any screen you're in that you like to access frequently, you can create your own navigation by just using whatever system you have for bookmarking things and creating those bookmarks, right? Really, really easy to do. Okay? Finally, almost done here. Last but not least, recent transactions. I can't tell you how many times I've recorded something and then closed it and immediately realized I need to go right back into that transaction because there's something I forgot to do. Or I've recorded something, then I go looking for it where I expected to find it and it's not there. And I know I've recorded it. Sometimes it's because I accidentally recorded it to the wrong account or something. So no harm, no foul. You just click up here on the magnifying glass and this shows you all of your recent transactions. And then you can actually go to the advanced search from here if you know you're looking for something very specific, right? So you can go to all transactions and you can search for any amount. I do this a lot. A client will call me up and say, hey, I had an Amex charge for $536.43 that should have come through. I can search by that exact amount here. Just be careful. Sometimes I get clients giving me, they'll round it. And they'll say it was like $530, and then I have to explain that I'm not going to find it that way. I need the exact amount for this to work, right? You could do ranges, right? But you don't have two sides of the range. You can only do everything greater than a number or greater than or equal to or less than or equal to. It would be great if you could say everything between $500 and $1,000 during a certain date range. But that's where you go back to the register, and I already told you. I gave you a link to a video that will show you how to do exactly that kind of thing inside the register. That's all, folks. I hope this gives you a very thorough overview of everything you need to know to dive into QuickBooks Online in 2021. It's time. It's 2021. let's do this. Let's get into the cloud. Let's use cloud-based software, true cloud-based software. It's very robust. It can do everything you need to do, especially when you consider the ecosystem of apps that you can use in connection with a product like QuickBooks Online. I'm convinced at this point there is absolutely nothing that you can't do accounting-wise with this product like this, especially when you factor in all the add-ons that you can bring into the mix when you need them. As always, if you have any questions or thoughts or feedback or anything you want to reach out to me about, just post your comments below wherever you happen to be watching this video, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Or you can always use the contact form on my website. Bottom line, I'm not hard to find. Anytime you have any questions or thoughts or ideas, reach out to me. I look forward to getting your feedback, and I can't wait to get the opportunity to help you with anything that I can help you with.